So let's get right started and jump into things. Let's talk about what is Google Apps. So I want to cover this partly because there's a lot more to Google Apps than immediately meets the eye, and partly because people tend to call different Google Apps by a lot of different names. Some people think of it as just Google Docs or Gmail, when in fact it's a lot more than that. So to begin, I want to take a step back and talk about what is the cloud? What is cloud computing? Google Apps is on a cloud. It is a cloud computing platform. It's in what we call in the cloud. And understanding what that means is important to understanding some of the advantages and disadvantages of using Google Apps. So to give you a bit of background, if you're not in the cloud, you'll be doing something like having your documents and information either stored on your computer or on a server in your organization is the most likely case. So for example, if you create a document, you possibly store it on the desktop of your computer in something like My Documents, or you might store it in, say, on a shared drive in a file server. So everything is within your organization, and you will probably need to maintain your own server in-house to be able to make that happen. In the cloud is quite different. So instead of your information being stored on your own computer or server, the information is stored in Google's data centers probably somewhere in the US and around the world. Google has several data centers. And you access this information through a browser such as Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, or Safari, and through an application that Google creates. This has a few basic advantages, one of which is that you can access it from anywhere. You don't need to be in your organization on your personal computer to be able to access your data. You can access it anywhere where you have an internet connection. However, there are some downsides to this that I will discuss later as well. So now that we've had a basic introduction to the cloud, I'm going to move on and talk about specifically what does Google Apps provide. And the first thing to know about Google Apps is that it provides you an email with your domain name. So to illustrate what this means, your domain name is basically the name that's used in your website. So in my case, I work at TechSoup Canada. Our website address is www.techsoupcanada.ca. So our domain name is techsoupcanada.ca. So if you email me, you can reach me at tierney@techsoupcanada.ca. This is very different than using a Gmail account with Google Docs because it's much more professional and it provides some other benefits as well. So I want to distinguish here up front between using Gmail accounts and connecting to Google services, which is perfectly possible, compared to using Google Apps and having your own email with your personalized domain name. Beyond your email, Google Apps has a variety of applications that they've bundled together for the purposes of Google Apps. And there's four main applications that I want to feature. The first one is Mail, Calendar, Documents, and Sites. So we'll look briefly at what each of these do. Google Mail is probably the one you're most likely familiar with because it's also available to anybody and it's more commonly known as Gmail. So you might even have a personal Gmail account. And if you do, you'll find that the interface looks exactly the same as you're used to in your personal Gmail account. It will look different, however, if you're used to using something like Microsoft Outlook. It's a bit of an adjustment because the interface does look different. So here's a little snapshot of what my inbox looked like at one point. I'm using a few special features of Google Mail, which you can ask me about later if you're interested. But basically to know, Google Mail simply is a standard mail client that lets you send, receive, and organize your email. The second primary application that you get in Google Apps is called Google Calendar. And again, if you're used to using Microsoft Outlook, you'll know that it's pretty similar to Microsoft Outlook's calendar. You can create meetings, you can schedule meetings and invite other members of your staff, and you can even see when other members of your staff are available. So in this case, if you look under other calendars, you can see that I've got a couple of my coworkers' calendars that they've shared with me. I can toggle those on and off and check which times they're free so I can schedule a meeting when everyone's free instead of emailing around back and forth until we find a time that works. The third of Google's applications that I want to highlight is called Google Docs. And this is one that you're probably also familiar with because it's it's pretty powerful, and this is maybe what's drawing you to Google Apps in the first place. So there's three main things you can do on Google Docs. You can create documents, store them, and collaborate on documents. And I'm actually going to show you a brief demo to explain what I mean by this. So if I go into my Google Docs account here, you'll see that I have, if I go into my home, I have a ton of documents that are stored in Google Docs. And I can create new documents. So I can create a Word document, a presentation, think like PowerPoint, a spreadsheet that's similar to Excel, a form, and a drawing. I can also create a collection, which is like a folder. It's basically a way of organizing documents. So I can create all these type of documents, and I can also store them on Google servers. And not only this, I can also store other types of documents that I don't create through Google Docs. For example, I could choose to upload a PDF and organize it in the same way as the rest of my documents, and also share it with my coworkers. And probably what I think is the coolest part of Google Docs is being able to collaborate on documents. So I've created a document called Demonstration, which I've shared with my coworker Jane. So if I open that up, we can see that I've already typed in a bit of text. And now what just appeared in the corner, it now says Jane is viewing, which means the two of us are viewing this document at the same time. And as I talk and don't even touch my keyboard, Jane is helping me out by typing into the document. So this particular document we're not going to use for anything too spectacular, as you can imagine, but it's just to demonstrate that we've got this feature of real-time editing. This is great if you're working across long distances with other people in offices in different parts of the city or different parts of the country. It's even great if you're working in the same office. We're sitting a couple of meters away from each other, but sometimes being able to see a document and work on it together is a really good way to revise a document and get feedback on it. So the last of the four main Google apps I'm going to mention is called Google Sites. Google Sites is basically a way of creating simple websites that are easy to get up and running, easy to edit, and you can change who is sharing them. Like anything in Google, you can determine, is it shared with you individually, is it shared with some of your coworkers throughout your whole company, or is it in fact shared publicly? So there's many different things you can do with these Google Sites. This one you can see is a project wiki, so sharing between team members of a project to share information, schedules, whatever you want. I want to show you a couple of Google Sites that we use in our organization. The first one is our internal site. This is a site we created quite a while ago as a way to document our internal processes. So as I've been learning more about webinars and using GoToMeeting for webinars, I've been writing myself some reminder tips. And this is helpful because I only do webinars every now and again. So when I need to come back and do it, I can find all the information I need to know here, and that gets saved instead of forgetting it. Similarly, if one of my coworkers comes to do a document, they can find the information they need to know here. However, the downside of Google Sites is that, like anything else, you do need to manage it. So this site has got a bit unwieldy for us, and we do need to clean it up a bit to make it more useful for us and make the information easier to find. The other Google site that we're currently using, and this is something that we started recently and we've been experimenting with, is we have a site for reporting. So basically we gather here all of our metrics and data, and then we've shared this site with the key people that we need to report to outside of our organization. And this provides one central place for them to come and get all of our key information while it's still being secure, so not anyone can come access it. And what you're seeing right here in front of you on this particular page is that we've actually embedded one of our Google documents into this page. So if I now went and updated this Google document, it would appear here live in real time. All the updates would be here. So Google Apps definitely tries to provide integration between their different applications. So as well as these four main Google apps, there's many more Google apps that you may be familiar with using in your personal lives that you can access as well through the Google Apps platform. So a few of these are Google Reader, Google AdWords, which is relevant if you have a Google grant, Google Analytics for your website, and other Google-owned but not Google branded products such as YouTube or Blogger. So through that email that I talked about, my tierney@techsoupcanada.ca Google Apps email, I can not only get access to all of these products, I can actually get single sign-on access, which means that once I've signed on to one of them in my browser, I automatically have signed into all of them. I don't need to re-sign in every time I open up a new tab with a different application. So that just saves me a bit of time and makes things more convenient. Another thing that you get with Google Apps that you don't get by using your personal Gmail account with Google Docs is you get access to the Google Apps Marketplace. Now, this isn't something that you're going to want to jump into right away necessarily, but it's something to be aware of if you're moving to Google Apps. That's a possibility once you've got settled in a little bit more. So basically what this is that third-party vendors, totally not connected to Google, have created applications, and they've made these applications integrate well with Google Apps. So maybe they integrate with the calendar, maybe they integrate with the documents or the sites, or all of the above. And Google has brought all these applications together in their marketplace to make it easy for you to find applications that integrate well. And this is good when you're stepping back and taking the bigger picture to look strategically at your technology and your organization. It's always better just saving time when things are integrated. So Google Apps provides you with the ability to actually achieve that kind of integration through the marketplace. A heads up is that these are all third-party vendors. So just because you have access and you have an account with Google Apps, these aren't created by Google. They're all created and priced separately. So some of them will have free versions, some of them won't. You'll have to evaluate them on an individual basis. But this is something that we at TechSoup Canada have been exploring, and it's something to be aware of if you are moving to Google Apps. Now, of course, as we are all nonprofits, a question that always comes up is, what is this going to cost me? I think it's good to have an IT budget, but obviously we all have a pretty tight bottom line. So the good thing about Google Apps, and one of the reasons that we do promote it for nonprofits, is that it is free for up to 50 users. That means if you have, I would say maybe 30 to 40 people in your organization or less, you would be good to get the free version. You don't want to be too close to the limit because you'll always need extra accounts, like say an info account or something else that might bump you up to that 50 user limit. Now, I need to give you a big warning. Something has come to our attention just in the past week. Google Apps has announced that they are changing their policy, and the free limit going forward is now only going to be free for up to 10 users. So that is a big difference, obviously, and much more limiting. After May 10th, so this is happening next week, organizations who register for the free version will have a maximum of 10 user licenses only. So normally I would recommend to take some time and think through use of Google Apps, and I still do recommend that, and I'll talk a bit more how to do that later. But if you are at all interested in Google Apps and you think in the future, maybe a few months down the road, you're going to want to try out using Google Apps, I do recommend signing up for an account now, only because you'll be able to get those 50 users, and a week from now you will not be able to get the free 50 users. Having said that, it's not like Google Apps is totally out of reach. They do have other pricing programs that are appropriate if you're a larger nonprofit or if you are not able to slip in before the May 10th deadline. They offer their product for businesses for $50 a user per year, and as well as providing the standard Google applications, this comes with a few other things that businesses are looking for, such as Google Video for Business, guaranteed uptime, 24/7 support, stricter security measures, and stuff like that. They do sell this product to businesses, educational institutions, as well as government, so certainly this is a big market for them at the moment. And the question always comes up, is there a nonprofit version of this product? And Google Apps does actually provide a nonprofit version. The bad news for us in Canada is that currently it's only available to US nonprofits. And as in my experience at TechSoup Canada, I will give you a heads up as well. It is likely that they will come to Canada. This is not inside knowledge, this is just my personal opinion. While it's likely that they will bring the nonprofit program to Canada and provide that nonprofit discount in the future, it is likely that if they do, it will only be available for registered charities. So if you are a registered nonprofit in Canada and not a registered charity, it's even more important to get the free version with the higher number of users, because you're not going to be getting a nonprofit version, unfortunately, anytime soon. Now, I'd like to talk a bit more about some of the advantages and disadvantages of Google Apps now that I've covered the different features. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, Google Apps is in the cloud, and that comes with a bunch of inherent advantages to it. One of them is that you can access Google Apps from anywhere you can have an internet connection. This is a really great point in a lot of ways. For us, it means that I can use Google Apps both at work, and if I need to work from home, I can use Google Apps from home because I have an internet connection, and it's exactly the same experience as being at work. A very big advantage. I can also access it on my mobile device or any other device that I want. Also, being in the cloud comes with having an automatic backup. So instead of having to worry about making sure that the information on my computer or on my organization's server is backed up, it happens automatically because Google has to make sure that your data is always available to you. So they're going to keep many different copies of it throughout their data centers. And this is a very high priority for them. So in fact, they're actually going to have a better backup schema than you do in your own organization. As I mentioned earlier, if you're not in the cloud, you're probably going to need your own server. So moving to the cloud means that you might be able to cut down on your IT spending within your organization. You might not need a server, you might not need the same level of IT support, and all the products such as Windows Server or whichever server product you're using, as well as security backup products that you need to maintain that server. So there can be some significant cost savings in that respect. And also, security in the cloud is an advantage, and I know this is something that a lot of people are concerned about, and to some extent rightly so. But the fact is that when you move to the cloud, you've got a dedicated team of engineers who are experts in security working to make sure that your data is secure. And as I mentioned, Google Apps is being sold to businesses and governments, so this is an extremely high priority for Google. They're going to look really bad if anything ever happens and their accounts get hacked into. So you can be sure they're putting a lot of work into it. Compared to that, in your organization, it's likely that you're not able to dedicate the same level of funds and attention to your security because, of course, you just don't have the time, the expertise, or the scale to be able to manage that in the same way. So you will get better security overall by going to the cloud. Some other benefits specifically of Google Apps include the fact that they're a great collaboration tool. There may not be as an advanced a tool, for example, as some desktop options. So for example, Google Docs does not have the same number of features as Microsoft Word. But with Microsoft Word, you cannot collaborate with others in the same way that you can collaborate on Google Docs. So that's one of the big benefits. As I mentioned before, you do get single sign-on. So being able to sign on to one application and automatically being signed into all the Google applications. As well, Google Apps is compatible with whatever different browser you want to use, and even with mobile. So personally, I have an iPhone, and I'm able to access and even edit my Google Docs on my iPhone, which is nice. May not be an issue right now, but as things do move towards more mobile, this is something to keep in the back of your minds. Central administration is another big benefit of Google Apps, and if you're not a techie, this might not sound very exciting, but I'll give you a little example to illustrate why this is actually really important. Let's compare a scenario where an employee leaves your company, and let's compare what that looks like if you have a bunch of personal Gmail accounts accessing Google Docs together compared to using a Google Apps organization account. So in the first scenario, your employee had their personal Gmail account that they were using at work, and they probably created a bunch of different Google documents. Maybe they created a Google site, etc. Maybe they owned some calendars. All of that stuff is owned by them, which means that they have the ultimate control over changes to it. If they leave, you no longer have access to that Gmail account that they used, and so you don't have any way to transfer the ownership to anyone else unless you go and track that employee down and ask them to do it, which could be difficult. However, if you have an organizational Google account, in our second scenario, all of the emails are controlled centrally. So if somebody leaves your organization, you still retain ownership of their email and everything that they created with that user account. So it's not as much of a concern. People can come and go. You can give them their emails or suspend them if they're going away for a little bit, and that's no longer an issue. The last benefit I'm going to mention, again, sounds like kind of a techie thing, but it's not. I'll explain why it's important, is called open architecture. Basically, really what that means to you is that things like the Google Apps Marketplace, those external applications integrating with the Google Apps, that is made possible because Google has opened up their architecture. Now, I don't want to pretend that any product is perfect or that any product doesn't come with any disadvantages. So I want to walk through some of the things to be aware of if you are thinking seriously about switching to Google Apps. First of all, being in the cloud, as well as its inherent advantages, does have some inherent disadvantages as well. It's come to attention specifically in the last year or so with some of the WikiLeaks kerfuffle that in the U.S., there are terrorism laws called the Patriot Act that allow the U.S. to request access to any data in a cloud system. So basically what that means is the U.S. government saying to Google, can we have this particular information? We have the right under our law to ask for that. And Google will be required by law to provide it to them and not tell you that that request was even made or that they provided that information. This feels kind of freaky for some people. For most of us, it isn't really a concern because we don't have information that the U.S. government is interested in finding out about, but it is something to be aware of if you do deal with politically sensitive information. Your information in Google Apps will be stored on servers in the U.S., and that's a possible concern. Another big disadvantage of the cloud, potentially, depending on your circumstance, is that you can only access it if you have an internet connection. So if you find yourself in a place where you have no internet connection, you won't be able to access any of your documents at all because they're not just stored on your computer. This is particularly something to keep in mind if you work in a more rural area or somewhere without good access to high-speed internet, or you have very intermittent access or dial-up or something like that. It's also something to keep in mind if you do live in an area where you have good internet access, however, you may be visiting somewhere that doesn't. For example, recently one of my coworkers went to a conference where they didn't have internet, and then she found in the break she wanted to work on one of her documents and couldn't access it because she had no internet connection. And if it had been stored on her computer, she would have been able to access it. So this is something to be aware of. I won't get into the debate on open source versus proprietary, but I will say that Google Apps is a proprietary system. The code is not open source for anyone to see and access. So if this is something you feel strongly about, you are not in favor of using proprietary software, then Google Apps probably won't be for you. I will also say that as much as Google tries to make their software easy, friendly to learn and use, really simple, there is a learning curve to adopting it. I don't recommend, especially if you have people in your organization that take some time to learn new software or are very used to using a particular software already. There is going to be a shift in a move to Google Apps, and if you have that kind of situation, I would recommend taking the time to get some training for your staff. There's no system that is easy to move to in a second and pick up without any training, and Google Apps is no exception to that. Particularly if you're very used to the Microsoft Office and just different Microsoft products in their format, you will find that some things in Google are a bit different and you need to take some time to learn that. Lastly, I say here Google has your information. At the end of the day, your information is not stored on your servers, it's stored on Google servers. So in their privacy policy, Google clearly states that you still own your data and that they would not give anyone access to it unless required to do so by law, as I discussed already. The fact is, though, at the end of the day, you do give up a little bit of control by moving to the cloud because your information is not stored on your own servers, it's stored on somebody else's servers. So, again, these are things to be aware of. I wouldn't say that in most cases they should be reasons to decide not to use Google Apps at all, but I think it's important to try, when going to try any new product, to be aware of both the pluses and the minuses involved. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention some of the other alternatives that exist to Google Apps. It's certainly not the only product on the market that will do these kind of things, that even is certainly not the only one that provides this kind of collaboration functionality. Often we look to Microsoft first, which is one of Google's big competitors. They're actually still working on coming out with their alternative to Google Apps. It's called Microsoft Office 365, and right now it's in beta, which means that they've got it mostly done and they're testing it with a smaller group of people before releasing it to everybody. From what I've been able to tell by reading on their website about it, it will have quite similar features to Google Apps, such as the mail, calendar, documents, and sites aspect, as well as some other stuff such as online meetings. Also, from what I've been able to tell, it looks like there will be a paid subscription for it, but I can't really give you details on the pricing at the moment. If this is something that you're interested in, I would contact Microsoft about that to find out more. And of course there are many others. I would say Zoho is probably, of all the other alternatives, the biggest contender. They have a wide suite of different cloud tools doing pretty much anything you can imagine. Any program you can think of on their desktop, they probably have a cloud version for it. So they're one to check out. There's also Zimbra, and there's many more. If this is something that you're interested in researching, I've provided a link to help you get started on that. So now that we've talked a little bit about what Google Apps is, I want to take a minute to discuss the question of, is Google Apps right for me? How do you know if Google Apps is appropriate for your organization? The fact is, any technology tool, you can look at it and say, this is really cool, it's pretty, it has a lot of nice features, TechSoup Canada really likes it, therefore maybe I should use it. And the fact is, it's never that simple. Trying to adopt any new tool into your organization always requires some thought about how it's going to fit with your individual needs and differences and processes and the people. That all needs to be thought through individually for your organization. It's not just enough that it works for someone else. So to help you think some of these questions through, I've prepared a worksheet. So we're not going to work through that right now, but you can access it through this link on our website, and I'll just show you a little bit about some of the questions that are on this. So for example, some of the things to think through is, first of all, who in your organization would be using Google Apps, and have they used Google tools before? As I mentioned before, there is a learning curve involved in moving to Google Apps. So you want to think about how people in your organization are going to react to this move. Do they like Google products, and are they comfortable with it? Or will this be a difficult challenge for them that requires a lot of training? I've also asked here, what are the key reasons you're planning to use Google Apps in your organization? So basically, how does Google Apps fit in with your processes? In our case, I'll give you an example. We have a customer service email account. As you know, as I mentioned already, we have a product donations program. So when you email that customer service account to ask questions or get help with whatever it may be, we have customer service reps that answer that, and they are currently located in the US. We also have our staff here in Canada that need to be able to access that email as well to deal with escalated issues. So Google Apps works really well for us because it's on the web. All of us can easily access the same email account from no matter where we are. So in that case, Google Apps is providing a clear benefit for our special process in our organization. So think about, what are your special processes in your organization, and will Google Apps allow you to do that, or will it make it more difficult? You also need to think about how Google Apps fits in with the rest of technology in your organization. So what other tools do you use? And does Google Apps integrate with them? You want to think through, where does Google Apps fit in the picture of your functionality? Are you going to be using the email portion of it? Or do you already have an email system you really like and all you want is to get the Docs functionality? Do you have, what is your IT budget? How might moving to Google Apps change what you spend your IT budget on? These are questions you want to think through before you move to Google Apps that will help you to be the most prepared and have the most successful move that you can. So I recommend going through these individually in your organization and talking with a few other people about them and thinking through, what does a move to Google Apps really mean for me? And all of these questions I mentioned, I want to leave you with this image. When we talk about technology planning, we talk about technology isn't just about the tool. As I've said before, any pretty shiny tool, it can look really cool, but that doesn't mean it will really fit for you. It's a mix of how it fits with the people, how it fits with your process, and how it fits with your other technology. So you want to consider all three of those pieces together when making a decision about a system for your organization, especially for a system that has the potential to impact your organization as much as Google Apps does. Now, if this is something that you're interested in working on, I certainly recommend doing some technology planning to think through this decision, and I also recommend having a bigger technology plan and strategy for your organization. If you don't have that already, that can seem pretty intimidating. So we at TechSoup Canada are working to help make that easier for nonprofits, and so we've created some resources which are on our website. So you can visit that at TechSoupCanada.ca and on our technology planning resources. We also welcome your feedback if there's something else that you feel we could do to make that a bit easier, because it's something we're continuously working on. One other resource I recommend that you look at is Framework. The Framework is another nonprofit that has done a lot of work around what is their technology strategy and trying to develop something that will work well for them. And they've documented their efforts, their experience, and their technology strategy at it.timeraiser.ca. So if you want to see an example of one organization's technology strategy that's very cloud-based, I recommend you have a look at that to get some ideas. Now, there's definitely lots more to think about in terms of whether Google Apps is right for you, but I'm going to leave you with that to think about, and some ideas to think about, and talk briefly about the practical details of how you get started with Google Apps. So if you are interested and ready to make the move to Google Apps, here are some things that you need to know before you get started. First of all, you need to know what your domain is. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is basically what is your website. So in my case, that would be TechSoupCanada.ca. You also need to know who your domain host is. So what this means is that originally the person who set up your website and who decided on that name for your website, the TechSoupCanada.ca, went to register it somewhere. The reason you need to do that is because you need to say TechSoupCanada.ca is mine. No one else can use it. I am going to register this domain and pay for the rights to use it. It's a small fee, about $10 a year probably. And you had to go to some organization to register it. So GoDaddy is one example that registers domains. You need to figure out in your organization, where is your domain registered? And also, what is the username and password to log in to wherever you registered your domain? This is going to be a necessary part of setting up Google Apps, so you want to know this before you get started. Now, once you're ready, here are the steps that you need to take at a high level to sign up for a Google Apps account. First of all, if you don't already have a domain name, so if you're a very new organization, you don't even have a website set up, you need to register for a domain name. And GoDaddy is one that I might look at. There's many others. It's not that difficult to find someone. And it doesn't matter for Google Apps who your domain is registered with. Once you've got your domain name, and as I mentioned, you know who it's registered with and what your username and password is, you're ready to start. So you can go to this page on Google and sign up for a new account. And as you can see, they ask you to enter your domain name, and once you do that, they're going to take you through a list of questions that will basically just ask you some information about your organization that you can enter, and you'll press OK, and you'll be ready on your way to get a Google Apps account. Once you've done that, and that's all been processed, Google is going to ask you to verify your domain. And what this means is they want you to prove that you actually own the domain name that you said. So I could go to their site, sign up for tierney'srandomsite.com. I could fill out the whole application, but I can't prove that I own that because I don't. I just made that up. So you need to prove that you actually own your domain. And this is where you'll need to be able to log in to the organization you registered your domain with. This is why you'll need that username and password I just mentioned. The steps are going to be different depending on who your domain host is, but Google has detailed instructions for all the different domain hosts. So once you get to that step, they will tell you what you need to know to go through that process. The thing to be aware of is that you have a 7-day window in which to do that. So this is why I say know this information in advance, because once you actually sign up for Google Apps, you will only have 7 days to verify your domain, and you don't want to run any issues in that time. Of course, it should only take a couple of minutes, but always good to be prepared. And lastly, once you've signed up, you're ready to activate your services and actually get started using it. Part of the reason I put this as a separate step is because you can choose not to do this. So if you don't activate your services, you can have your Google Apps account being dormant until you're ready at a future time to actually move to using Google Apps. This is especially applicable, of course, if you are signing up purely to take advantage of the 50 free user accounts that, as I was saying, is going to decrease on May 10th. However, if you are ready to move ahead with Google Apps, then you can go ahead and activate your email, your documents, all the different services that Google provides, and get signed up. So I'm not going to go through in detail how to do all those different things, but I will tell you that there are a lot of great resources on the web, and I've made a list here of some of what those are to point you towards them and get you started. I've found the best resources actually there's a series of videos on YouTube that will walk you through step by step how to do each one of these steps in the process that I've described. So I've provided a bunch of different links here. The one thing to be aware of is that a couple of these are 1 or 2 years old. The process has basically stayed the same, but the interface may have changed a little bit. You may see in the video the buttons are in a slightly different place that they are when you look at them on the internet. That's okay, don't worry about it. Just follow through with the process and you'll be fine. Google Apps has quite a good help site if you need any help on different issues, which I recommend going to. They also have forums and various other mechanisms for support to find out whatever it is you need to know about Google Apps and getting started and deal with any issues that you run into. So in summary, I've covered what Google Apps is, the different features, some of the advantages of being in the cloud, some of the downsides. I recommend you take some time to think, reflect on what I've told you, think about whether Google Apps is a good fit for your organization or not. And then if you are ready to take the next step, there's some basic resources that will help you get started in signing up. Now at this point, we do have some time for questions, so if you have some questions that haven't already been addressed, feel free to ask them and I will share the answers with everybody. So there have been some great questions asked already and some more being asked. I'm just going to go through even the ones that have been answered and briefly explain those in case you were paying so much attention to me that you didn't get a chance to read all the answers as we went along. So first of all, somebody asked if you could share a site publicly. So sites created and Google Sites can indeed be shared publicly. You may need to enable this through the administration control panel, but it is possible to share it publicly or restrict it to as few people as you want. An example, during the talk I mentioned it.timeraiser.ca. That's actually a Google site that they have chosen to share publicly, so that's a perfect example of how you can use that feature. The next question is how do you embed Google Documents in a Google site? And I'll actually quickly show you how to do this. Basically, if I'm in my Google site here and I want to edit this page, I'll choose to edit page. And then I will say insert. And then you see here I can choose document. And it gives me a list of my Google Docs. Now if I select one, and I say select, and I save that, and then I save this page, you can now see that I've embedded my Google document into this Google site. Okay, also, one thing to know about embedding Google Documents, just a question that just got raised. When you embed a Google document in a Google site, you can't actually embed it through the site. You can't actually edit through the site. So if I click here, I can't edit. I'm typing on my keyboard, and I'm not being able to change anything. So it's view only. If I actually want to edit this document, I need to open it in Google Docs and make my changes. So if we do that, and I save now, we see I go back to the webinar page, and if I just refresh the page, we can see that my changes have now appeared. What is the storage limit for the free version? It depends a bit on, I actually don't know this off the top of my head. I think it's about 10 gigabytes of storage for each one. It's not something I've ever come up against. I know I'm well below the storage limit. If you have really, really big files that you store on Google Docs, it might start to be an issue, but for most people it probably won't be a concern. Also, if you use it over years and years, you might have to curate that a little bit. Over the short term, probably not an issue. Do we have to register the new domain name first before creating a site under Google Apps? So you do need to have a domain name registered before you sign up for Google Apps. I think you mean maybe creating a Google site. You don't need to create your own domain name for each site. So if we look at this, for example, my internal site, and we look at the URL, it's actually sites.google.com/blah blah 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 /a/TechSoupCanada.ca/internal. So I didn't have to create a separate domain name for this site. If you do want to create a separate domain name, like it.timerazor.ca, that's a subdomain of your main domain. This may sound a bit techy. If you do want to do that, you can do that through your domain registration and then associate it through the control panel with your Google site. So that is possible to give it a custom domain name. You can also create custom domain names for your documents, for your email, etc. Do we have to give up our existing website if we port over to Google Apps? Good question. No, you do not. So Google Apps is totally separate from your website. All that's linked is the domain name. So your website is completely separate. It's on whatever hosting you have it on. You're not touching your website. You're just making use of the same name as you use for your website. You can retrieve a document deleted by accident. It will stay around for a little bit in your trash. After a while, it may be permanently deleted, so you may only have a limited time in which to get it back, but you can get it back if you just do it right away. And yes, we are recording this, and I hope to be able to post it somewhere where you guys can all get access to it. So it should be in the same place on our website as our link, and I'll also try to email that around to everyone who attended this webinar session. Are there any other questions? Okay, great. Oh, yes. Thank you very much for your attendance, and we will actually, in about an hour, a follow-up email from GoToWebinar will go out, and one of the things that's in that email, as well as just thanking you for attending, is a link to an evaluation survey. So we'd love to get your feedback on whether this webinar was helpful and what we could do to improve this type of webinar in the future, or if there's any questions you have that didn't get answered, you can also let us know through that method. So please take the time to answer this. This will be really helpful for us in helping to improve our services, and we thank you very much for your attendance today, and have a great rest of your day.